Well, the big challenge that we're facing today is not in our face. It's all around us. This is this great global challenge of global unsustainability. And I know unsustainability is not a word, but you're dealing with the Marines, so just deal with it, okay? So global unsustainability. And if you look at this in and of itself is a system. It's a system, and we kind of looked at this thing as a four-part system. Number one, we're going to 9 billion people. Right? We have a problem in the global economy, in an economic sense, of global inclusion, of economic inclusion. Because it's not just about going to 9 billion people. It's about the 3 billion people that we have to merge into the global middle class. And I think Andrew mentioned earlier, we don't have the right to say, stop, holy cow, what are you doing? We don't have the right to do that. Right? It's in our interest to see that 3 billion people can move in to that global middle class. But the problem that we face is part number 2 of the big vexing problem with economic inclusion. We have this issue of ecosystem depletion. Right now, we're already expending. We saw just about 1.5 planets worth of resources to support the human race. Now, holy cow, if the rest of the world consumed at the rate the United States consumes, that's 4.5 planets. 4.5 planets. And guess what? We got 3 billion people chasing the American dream. Some facsimile of it anyways. And when they arrive in the global, 3 billion people arrive in the global middle class, their resource consumption is going to go up 300%. We don't have enough stuff to support that, at least within the current design that we have. Right? That's problem. Component number 2 of this grand challenge is ecosystem depletion. Number 3 is that we're actually in a contained depression right now. If you think this is just a flash in the pan recession, and we'll just do some more quantitative easing and we'll get out of it, well, guess again. We're at a fundamental deleveraging point that's as historic as what it was in 1929 when we had the Great Collapse, or kicked off the Great Depression, right? Fundamental deleveraging point. Got to come to grips with it. We cannot just put the old system on life support. We need a new system. And we talked about all that stuff earlier. Which leads us to the 4th problem that we have is we have this huge resilience deficit in the world right now. Because they talked about it, they already teed up everything. I don't even know why I'm talking. They already teed it up before. We are focused so much on efficiency, we're hyper-efficiency, but we're not very effective anymore. And just to give you a sense of just how close the margins are now, remember when Fukushima, the big, the tsunami hit and freaking disaster and everything, right? Well, there was this little factory just to the north of the actual nuclear facility. I can't remember what the name of the factory is, I'm sorry. Right? But it cranked out a $3 gasket for the auto industry, $3 gasket. Well, it couldn't produce those $3 gaskets. So a month later, when the supply chain dried up, the 4 major automakers in the United States started feeling the crunch in their supply lines. Now, you can't show causation, but you sure can show a strong correlation, the fact that that $3 gasket was one of the prime drivers of our national unemployment rate jumping from 8.9 to 9.1%. That's how tight the frickin' margins are. Now, who would design a system like that? I guess we would, because we did, right? Well, we've got to undesign that and figure it out. And that's why we got to think, when they talk about those challenges, those big 4 components of that challenge, you can't address one without dealing with the rest. You have to deal with that thing at the systems level. And this is a big-ass system that we're talking about. It's global. It's global. And that's why we have to have grand strategy, because now you can put it in, I don't want to say you put it in a box, but you can put it in a context so you can actually start doing something. Now, I just threw this thing up here because there is a logic framework. You can go from the big, wicked problem, but you can take it on with grand strategy at the system level if you're just willing to go there. And we've done it before. This is what pisses me off, is we've done it in the past. And right now, our mantra is, well, it never happened. It can't possibly be done. Horseshit. It can be done. Oops. I promised my wife I wouldn't swear, and I just made it. So don't. I know now I'm being recorded. Somebody's going to send it to my wife, and I'm going to be so. Please keep it a secret. All right. We can take this thing on at the level of the problem, at the systems level of the problem. Now, I'm not going to get into the governance and the foreign policy stuff, but this is that framework where when we do grand strategy well, we stand on our economy. We align our governing institution, our foreign policy to take on the great global challenge of our age. That's the logic. Is it the right one? I don't know, but we're figuring it out. But I do know we have to start at the economy, at the economic level. And, oh, by the way, it's not about gloom and doom. We, as Americans, we can take an opportunities way out. We can design anew if we think anew and act anew, as Lincoln would admonish us to think. We can start with U.S. economic policy. And our basic framework, and I'm going to get to it in a second, but our economy can be driven by this concept of sustainability to drive us out, take on this problem at the systems level in an opportunities-based way. This isn't about, austerity measures, we just got to hunker down and hopefully it'll go away. It's not going away. It's also not Keynesian theory to spend your way out of it, because you can't spend your way out of Armageddon, right? We've got to think anew and design anew, and we think we found it. Because one thing that I think that Ben Bernanke is right about is that if we're going to get the U.S. economy off the ground again, we've got to find big pools of latent demand, all right? And we've got to shove capital in that direction to make it run. And sustainability takes us in that direction. And oh, by the way, I'm not going to get in depth on the stranded asset problem. You can't just ignore that problem. It's huge, but there may be opportunity buried in that. We can talk about that a little bit later if you want. Bottom line, let's just talk about the opportunity. In the form of big structural demand that's in our economy right now, that's informed by this concept of sustainability, if you just put your sustainability goggles on. And oh, by the way, when you have those sustainability goggles on, they're not going to be colored green. If anybody thinks that sustainability is a green movement, well, let's go in the parking lot and talk about it, all right? Because it's not a green movement. Because as soon as you put it in the language of green, guess what? You've cut off about 50% of the population, and no one's going to frickin' listen to you. And oh, by the way, you're also minimizing your ability to actually engage the system at the terms of the system. So now it might feel good politically or ideologically just to talk about sustainability as if it's green. Well, get over yourself. You've got to start talking about it as business and private sector and national security, all those facets, okay? And that's what we're talking about. And talking about it from an opportunities base, not the gloom and doom, because nobody's going to frickin' listen to you. Talk about opportunity. So what's the opportunity? Walkable communities. I'm talking about housing. One of the main drivers that we can, or one of the main driving elements of demand that we can use to get ourselves out of our current situation to something better, that's more sustainable future, is through housing. Yeah, I said housing. And here's why. 56% of Americans, this according to the National Association of Realtors, 56% of Americans don't like where they live. More specifically, 56% of Americans seek the attributes of smart growth. Mixed use, mixed income, service-rich, transit-oriented, walkable communities. And the reason that number, 56%, exists is because we are sitting right now on a historic demographic convergence that we haven't seen in quite some time. Right now, baby boomers, they're downsizing, right? They're going into their golden years. They don't want to be stuck up in the suburbs anymore. I mean, you don't want to have your keys taken away from you. You don't want to be stuck somewhere where somebody's shoveling applesauce in your face. You want to be engaged. And that's what their preference is in the housing market. The numbers just show it, all right? At the same time that the baby boomers are downsizing, the millennials are just now coming into the market for their first housing purchase. They're starting their families. And guess what? Now, I grew up in Wayzata, Minnesota, suburbs of Minneapolis, and I watched the Brady Bunch, so I was like in the suburbs of Minnesota, I was like, hey, this makes sense. Brady Bunch. All right? Well, I don't know who are the millennials? I don't know, Friends? What'd you guys watch? Something like that, right? But something that's not the lifestyle they want. They want something that's hip, that's happening, that actually maps to the social system that they know and experience, largely through Facebook or whatever it is now. My son just told me, I have a 13-year-old, and I said, you want a Facebook account now? And he's like, Dad, nobody does Facebook anymore. So, whatever the hell they do. But the millennials are moving in there, and they want the same thing. That's for 56%. That is a historic convergence. And yet only 2% of new housing startups will map to that demand. Now, again, nose pick and marine, 56% demand, 2% supply. What is that gap? It's economic opportunity waiting to happen. It's waiting for capital to flow in that direction. And oh, by the way, just to put it in historic terms, that demand for housing is 3 times greater than what the returning GIs offered to our economy post-World War II. And we know that demand drove our economy in the form of suburban sprawl up through the late 70s, early 80s. 3 times. It's real numbers. It's happening right now, and we're asleep at the switch just from basic policy decisions that we make and just this weird urban legend, or non-urban legend, suburban legend that we got, all right? Second thing, regenerative agriculture. Yeah, regenerative agriculture. You want to call it organic? I don't care. I'm from Minnesota. I used to work on our family farm, dairy farm up in Dalton, Minnesota. So there's my street cred talking in the middle of the corn country. We better fundamentally come to grips with the fact that the way we grow our food right now is killing us. And from a national security perspective, it scares the hell out of me that 50% of Iowa's topsoil is gone. According to Michigan State University, there's places in our country where up to 75% of our topsoil is gone just because of the way that we farm. And let's not even talk about water. Because, I mean, if you talk to a Kansas farmer right now, he's kind of getting a little bit of a sweaty lip over the Ogallala, I think I said that right, Ogallala aquifer, and the fact that in some areas, 10 to 15 years from now, it's going to be dry. That's some scary stuff. And it's a self-inflicted wound. But that's kind of the downside of it. The good side of this thing is that there's global demand for products that come out of regenerative agriculture. Specifically, if you consider that the OECD just this year came out and said that by 2050, we have to increase our global food production by 60%, and 100% of that has to be regenerative, simply because ecosystems cannot take it anymore. That's a huge, huge market demand. And by the way, we can make that shift at scale in the United States at a time when food prices are at an all-time high. Yeah, that's Machiavellian, but God damn it, you know, we can do that and make a buck doing it and fuel our engine, our economic engine, to show the world a different direction, considering that we still hold roughly a quarter of the global economy in our pockets. All right? Now is the time to act. And the cool thing about it, let's just take it down to the acre per acre comparison. If you look at the Rodale Institute's 30-year farm trial, they did an acre to acre per comparison between what we can call industrial ag versus a regenerative agriculture model. Per acre yields, equivalent. Interesting, in times of drought, regenerative agriculture is 30% more productive than industrial ag. With climate change coming, maybe we want to be interested with that. But here's the most important part. Per acre, if you consider the entire system, externalities, regenerative agriculture is 3 times more profitable per acre. And if anybody says, yeah, that'd be neat, but we can't do it, again, I almost swore, but I'm not. I'll say BS. Right? In 1972, Secretary of Agriculture Earl Butz said, we will plant fence row to fence row. It was an overt policy decision that created the system that we have today. That was 40 years ago. It's probably going to take 40 years to create a new system, but we have the capacity to generate the policies to get there. You know? We just need to have a farm bill that makes sense. Right? We can do this. The third one, productivity revolution. This is the way we get to that 3 billion people, the global middle class. We shouldn't try to keep them out. What we should be going is like, come on in. Not only does that improve our security environment, but it also provides a huge market for new goods. Right now, we have the technologies in advanced manufacturing, advanced materials, renewable energy. If we would just choose to take them to scale to hit that market. 3 billion customers. What part of America doesn't want that? This is the part that matters because it informs the actions of each and every one of us as citizens of the United States. Not residents, not consumers, but citizens. And what Hubert Humphrey reminded us of when it says, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and most importantly, to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. It's not just about us. Go figure. Each one of those words, to form, establish, provide, promote, secure, are action words. They demand action, and they demand, we just talked about, this has to go on forever. It does. If you want a government of the people, by the people, for the people, not to perish from this earth, we have to constantly tend to those words, those actions. That's why sustainability becomes our national strategic imperative. Not only does it map to our current condition and our future requirements, it's well within keeping of our enduring national interests of prosperity and security. It also maps to a construct that is within our strategic DNA as Americans. But most importantly, it is within the fiber of our founding document. Because sustainability is not an end state. It's a condition that we constantly have to tend to, constantly strive toward, constantly redesign ourselves to map to our current condition and the future condition we want to see. This is why it's grand strategy. It's not just fluff, it's not wonk stuff, it's real life citizens taking our own destiny into our own very capable hands. Surely that is in keeping with what Dr. Deming wanted all of us to do. But most importantly, surely isn't that something that's worthy of us as a people and a nation and worthy of our children? I would say so. So thank you.